Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. There we go. I had to turn up my headphones a little bit. You had these way down.
I didn't sit there.
Well, someone did. I think I probably kicked it. Welcome in. OU opponent preview, BYU week 11, George. 2 more weeks left as we make a trip out to Utah coming this weekend, headed out there on Friday. We've talked about it. We talked about it on the Tuesday show. We talked about it on the Unofficial 40. I'm excited for this trip. I don't really know what to expect. Never been to Utah, and we'll see. Everything that I've heard, funny enough, went to the dentist today. The lovely dental hygienist, BYU graduate.
What are the chances?
I S you not. And because I was telling her, I don't really know what to expect. And she's like, guess what? I went to BYU. So
is she Mormon?
I didn't ask. I just assumed.
Okay.
If we're going to be honest. I don't know, though. So I don't know what to expect. Lavelle Edwards Stadium. It is interesting that this is the first time that Oklahoma's been out to Provo. They've only played twice in the 1994 Copper Bowl, as well as the 2009 game, which we'll hear from Brent Venables here shortly, talking about that experience down at Jerry World, a game we were both at. Mm-hmm. How old were you in 2009?
13.
There you go.
I remember the game.
I was a freshman in college. So
you're old.
Or no. I was not a freshman in college. I was a senior in college. My first time around the senior trip.
So you're even older.
Yes. Very much so. Let's shoot you guys straight here. Welcome into the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. BYU's not a very good football team, George.
No, they aren't. And I think that there was this assumption that they were going to be, one, because BYU typically is, and they still are, a very good football program, and they still have a chance to make a bowl game. And I think early in the year, they go on the road, they beat Arkansas, and everybody's like, well, they might be pretty good. Well, it turns out Arkansas is terrible, and BYU has really struggled. They've had some injury issues, especially at quarterback this season, but this isn't a great football team. That said, Oklahoma has to go in and play well, because if they play like they did against Kansas and OSU, it'll be a tight game. And I'm sure BYU, they're trying to get to a bowl game. They need one more win, and it's going to have to either come against Oklahoma or Oklahoma State. That's a tall task. I'm sure they feel pretty comfortable playing at home. Maybe they feel like their better shot is this weekend. 24-point underdogs, though. Oklahoma needs to go up and take care of business, though, because you're right, Eddie. Statistically, you look at it, the way they've been playing recently, this is not a good football team Oklahoma's going up against.
No, and it's a little bit different because they are 5-5 on the season. They've lost 3 in a row. Just 3 short weeks ago, this team was 5-2.
Yeah.
They had a lead against Kansas in their first Big 12 game. But as you said, it's been, if not one thing, it's been another, whether it be injuries or the quarterback situation with Keaton Slovis. It'll be interesting to see what his status is going into Saturday. 2 completely different offenses as far as Keaton Slovis and the backup. A little bit more run game with the backup as opposed to Keaton Slovis, who wants to do things with his arm. But as we said, they have struggled offensively as of late. Put up 13 last week at a 45-13 loss in Provo to Iowa State, 37-7 loss in Morgantown the week before, and then they went down to Austin the week before they went out to Morgantown, losing 35-6. So offensively, it's been a bit of a problem for the Cougar offense. They don't have Zach Wilson. They don't have Jaron Hall. They certainly don't have a Taysom Hill on this roster, and I think that they're rather young and having to play the division, or the Power 5 teams each week. It's a little bit different because they're coming from an independent as opposed to a G5 for the other 3 Big 12 editions, but it's trying times right now for Kalani Sitake's program.
And it starts really, you mentioned the quarterback situation, and they've certainly struggled there, but they haven't been able to run the football. I think they rank last in the Big 12 in rushing offense, so they haven't been able to run the football, which Oklahoma's been very good at stopping this year. So it'd be interesting to see what BYU's strategy is to go up against this Oklahoma defense. And then, like you said, they've given up a ton of points. I think Iowa State, what did they score last week?
45.
45,
and I think had a clip at about 460-something total yards.
That's not Iowa State's playing good football, but that's not some high-powered offensive machine that Iowa State's got going on right now. So it's been a really, really tough sledding for BYU. But again, you go in. I'm interested to see what the atmosphere is like.
Sure.
Do the fans show up? It's a 10 a.m. game. The team's not very good, but big opponents in town. You always hear the cliche saying, OU's every team's Super Bowl. It's the same case for BYU. I'm sure BYU would feel really good about themselves. Maybe they've struggled in the Big 12 all year, but if they can go in and sneak up and beat an Oklahoma team at home, I'm sure the students will be fired up for the game. It's going to be a fun atmosphere.
It's one of those matchups, too, that, BYU, whether you want to recognize them as a current, certainly not a power now, it's a national brand.
Yeah.
Obviously the religion connection to the Mormon faith. It's a big deal. There's a lot of people that show up, and that's why I think on Saturday it should be a pretty good atmosphere, all things considered. And I'm excited to see Lavelle Edwards Stadium, which is, Brent Venables
Beautiful
talked about
backdrop.
being a backdrop that is just kind of picturesque. I know that the baseball stadium has a really cool backdrop, as well as, just watching from afar. And BYU, they're a national brand. You see them out there. I've always kind of just, I guess, enjoyed watching them play football. If nothing else, I'm a big blue guy. As you can see today, I made George wear the same thing, which you said that was BYU blue, correct?
I did not. I never said that. I not once said that, but we are both wearing blue.
We are.
Matching blue, too, it seems.
Well,
but,
that's called synergy, I believe.
Yeah.
Brent Venables did talk about the BYU program this week at his weekly press conference.
Yeah, Coach Edwards, obviously, he's a legend and a Hall of Famer, and he won. That's what I remember. He won a lot, and he did it with great quarterback play and a great culture. And that game is obviously it's a really good game, despite having some guys injured both before the game and during the game. Big, physical, mature football team, that you're going to have to be ready to have it strapped up. They're going to bring it. They're going to play with passion and physical toughness, mental toughness, and they're going to fight for 4 hours. And so nothing's going to come easy. Again, it's an incredibly tradition-rich program, has been for such a long time, and have one of the most loyal and passionate fan bases in all of college football. All the college football history excellence that's represented, players and coaches and wins at BYU. I've always seen the picture, probably, that if you like college football, there's the picture of the stadium down in, nestled in the mountains in the valley there, and it looks pretty cool. And so it'd be fun to go compete. I got, again, incredible respect, for their program and, for Coach Satake and what he's been able to do, and again, the passion and the loyalty that the fan base has is second to none.
Two things in terms of playing on the road in Provo this weekend, George. You are technically playing at altitude. I know that was asked of Brent Venables earlier this week as a natural playing surface, which you don't see very often in college football anymore. And I think it's kind of that old style, like Wrigley Field long cut, if you will, in terms of what Oklahoma will be playing on. So I would imagine that, the choice of cleat this week could be important for a lot of those guys, as you see, some guys slipping and sliding all over the place out there. But you think that matters much going into the game, just in terms of tempo and what Oklahoma wants to do? I would say that Oklahoma, if they go up there and you don't turn the ball over and you don't set yourself back with penalties, you should be able to make a big enough lead that you aren't having to play a whole lot of tempo. But just kind of your thoughts on that as we get ready to head up there.
Yeah, as someone
bringing a gas mask,
as someone who lived in Denver for 3 years, I can tell you the altitude will get to you, especially if you're not used to it. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. These guys are. It gets to somebody like me climbing stairs. These guys are borderline professional athletes. I'm sure Schmitty has them ready to go, so I don't think it'll be too big of an issue. We'll see. I'm interested to see what the weather does. I know we've talked about that. Is it going to rain?
The rain as of taping here on Thursday, I think we're still kind of good.
I think it's going to be
getting
cloudy,
a little bit
we'll
better.
See.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to see the sun necessarily in Provo, but I don't think that we'll be wearing a bunch of parkas and ponchos out there.
But if we are, it'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma does the game plan, because the last time it rained, the game plan seemed to go out the window.
Sure.
And all of a sudden the offense didn't know what it was doing. So I'd be kind of interested to see if it does rain, what does Jeff Lebby do, Dylan Gabriel, the offense, do they continue to push the ball down the field like we saw this last week against West Virginia? But I do think I think the whole altitude stuff is overplayed. The grass, I don't know anything about the grass. It sounds like I know Iowa State kind of has that taller grass as well.
I think it's kind of similar to what they have in Ames, and I don't know if that has to do with weather or I don't know why they haven't gone to a shorter cut grass or anything like that. I'm not that guy if you're looking into the agriculture side of things.
Do you mow a lawn or anything? You a mower?
I'm not. I live in an apartment down at the COVID compound in Norman. I could tell you something about grass, though. Probably just not the type they're playing on. It is one of those things. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. It is one of those things, though, that it's different. And I think just like a lot of stuff this weekend in Provo, it's going to be a first for many. It will be a first playing in Provo. It obviously won't be the first time that they played the program. Oklahoma played BYU back in 2009, a game that a lot of Oklahoma fans probably don't want to remember, a 14-13 final score to open the 2009 season. Brent Venables was on staff and was asked about his memories from that game and then that season on Tuesday.
Again, just the physicality, the maturity of the team, the size, certainly the injury, the toughness that our players fought with, both teams fought with. I think it was a 1-point game, and literally a game of inches. And but I remember our team didn't flinch. When we lost, that was pretty devastating. And our guys responded. We had, I think, 3 losses that year by 1 point. We went to Miami and lost 21-20. Somebody else maybe in that season, but kind of started the season off in a rough way. But man, it was one of my favorite years in coaching. Again, it's one of those seasons where it was all about what we had to overcome, and we didn't win a quote-unquote championship. I think we beat Stanford in the bowl game that year with Toby Gerhardt. I think their quarterback was out. And but that was kind of a year where it was just you had to overcome a lot, and but our guys fought. That's what I remember about that team, and they had fun fighting. We grew in 2 different ways to look at it. Man goes behind bars, and some see mud and some see the stars. It's to me it's a choice, and circumstances, you can't change them, but your perspective can. I remember that year just being a year where we had to overcome a lot and just we had a lot of fun, building that team and developing an identity.
That was a trying season for Oklahoma as Sam Bradford got hurt.
Jermaine Gresham had gotten hurt.
The season really never even began with a team at full strength with the Jermaine Gresham thing. I remember that was like one of the first communications between Kerry Murdoch and myself back in 2009 was kind of leading into that week with the rumors that, kind of surrounded Jermaine Gresham's status going into the season with the knee injury, if I remember correctly. And then, obviously Sam getting hurt in the I think it was it right before halftime maybe?
Yeah, it was. It was a close game too. I think it was
14-13 was the final.
I know, but I think that at the time OU was winning maybe, and they were driving, and he got hurt.
It was 10-7 at halftime. Oklahoma led. They led 7-0 after the first quarter. You look at, and it was kind of one of those things like you don't necessarily remember the real specifics about that game. BYU turned the ball over. You want to guess how many times?
Was it 3?
4 times.
Wow.
4 times.
I remember most of the game. I remember, wasn't there a late field goal Oklahoma tried from like really far and he missed it? Yep. I can't remember who the kicker was. Was it Hartley?
No, I think it was actually Tress Way that ended up attempting the kick because it was so long.
Yeah.
They thought, well, Tress has a great leg. Let's run him out there.
It was not even close, was it?
No, I don't believe so. And I want to say that, to Tress's credit, I mean, he's now in year 13 or 14 in the NFL as a punter. I'm pretty sure that it was over 50 yards, if I remember correctly.
It was.
To try to win the game.
I remember because I remember telling my dad, I was like, I don't think they're going to get anywhere close to making this field goal, and they didn't. But that was the beginning of the greatest quarterback of all time.
Landry Jones, our first introduction to Landry. And as Brent said, the 2009 season, 21-20, they would go on to lose in Miami. I remember that game. Broke a lot of stuff over at the Fiji House that night. 16-13. Texas down at the Cotton Bowl.
I was at that game.
And I think when he refers to the 1-point losses, he meant 1-score games.
That was my first OU Texas game, the 16-13 game.
That they lost.
Yep.
You should have never been invited back to the Cotton Bowl. And then they lost 10-3 and then Ndamukong Suh game.
Yep, I remember that one too.
He absolutely, after that game, I remember thinking this guy should probably win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah. It was a tough season. They had so many injuries that year. I remember Sam tried to come back against Texas.
Yeah,
it was just a rough year, but they ended up like he said, kind of finishing out strong there, beating a good Stanford team in the Sun Bowl down in El Paso.
Now, the one negative spot on that was also a ass whooping out in Lubbock, 41-13, a game that I think probably a lot of people remember. The alternate uniforms, one of the great alternate uniforms in Oklahoma football history.
But they can never wear those again.
Ryan Broyles had the taunting call, I believe, or unsportsmanlike conduct call, and Bob Stoops just losing his S on the sidelines. I think that was at the point that I was down there for that game. That was the point that we looked at each other and said, yeah, let's go out to the tailgate and have some pledges.
What did BYU finish that year? Because I feel like that BYU team, they came into that. They were ranked in the top 25. They ended up having a really good year, I think.
In 2009? I actually do not know what they finished in 2009. That's 2023. I don't know. I can't answer your question. I am unprepared.
Well, there you go. But I thought they were a good football team that year.
They were. Fortunately for Oklahoma, that's not the team that they'll be playing come Saturday. For our weekly opponent preview interview, we sat down with one of our good friends, the great Max Olson from The Athletic, senior college football writer, and here that is. Welcome in, Max. Thank you for joining us. Understand that you're going up to Ames this weekend. I want to get into that game. What an S show the Big 12 has become with all these tiebreakers. I'm pulling for what you tweeted about in talking about an 8-way playoff. Now, that would be bad on the other end because Oklahoma fans might literally burn down the stadium while we're gone in Provo. But what a mess this was this week.
Yeah, good job by you, George. Really starting all these fires and making the rest of us do our job. I hate it. I think I looked it up, Eddie. I think in the eight-way tie for first place scenario, I think OU finishes 7th. I don't think that would be very satisfying to OU fans.
No, that would not be.
But that's the range of outcomes we're talking about here. You know, 1 to 8, somewhere around there is where all of these teams have a chance to finish. It's gonna be very fun.
No doubt. It's going to be really interesting. Obviously, going into this weekend, there's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching with Oklahoma playing the 10 a.m. game in Provo or the 11 a.m. game back here in Oklahoma. It will be kind of interesting. Come Saturday night, you're headed up to Ames to check out Iowa State and Texas. If you just looked at the box score and the final score of things that happened down in Fort Worth over the weekend, you probably would have wondered what the hell Texas was doing in the fourth quarter. But just kind of your overall thoughts going into the weekend that is for the Big 12.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Texas played another one of these games where they looked terrific in the first half and then let TCU back in that game in the second half. And Iowa State put together one of their best performances of the season in going out to Provo, playing a late night game and dominating BYU. So I could see why there's a lot of enthusiasm around Iowa State to maybe put Texas on upset alert here. And Texas has lost 3 of its last 4 in Ames. So it's an interesting spot, especially for Texas without Jonathan Brooks. You've got to figure out, can you get a solid run game going with C.J. Baxter and Jaden Blue and Keelan Robinson and the guys they've got behind him? Because Brooks was just so good this year and so reliable. So that's going to be an interesting spot. But, man, the way this schedule sets up this week, there's just a lot. There's a lot on the line, and I think a bunch of trap games that you would circle. I think Texas Tech, UCF will be interesting. I think that, Oklahoma State could potentially have a little bit of trouble with Houston, a team that's really got its back against the wall this week. I think that what am I missing? It's a pretty good slate.
Yeah, Kansas State and Kansas as well.
Come on. Yeah,
that entire situation in Lawrence is just interesting with Jason Bean and what his injury status is going to be going into the weekend. Have you ever heard, officially what is going on with Jason Bean? I know it was really kind of weird as things were ramping up during the pregame for the West Virginia game last week. It never really was said, and I understand that Lance Leipold is probably not the most forthcoming with injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a funky year for them, obviously. For Jalen Daniels, this back injury has just dragged on. And I think they already thought he'd be back by now, and it just hasn't gotten right. Back injuries are obviously tricky. They're different from these other ones. And so that's been tough to be without their best player. And then, Jason Bean, knocked out of the Texas Tech game, going through concussion protocol this week. Even if he is cleared to play, and that would be huge for their chances if he is, not getting a lot of practice this week. They're a little bit banged up. It's not the best time for Kansas to play this game. And guys, K-State is rolling right now. K-State is their margin of victory in their last 4 wins is on average 32 points. They got a plus 10 turnover margin over the last 5 games. So I think K-State will roll in this game. But man, this would be a massive deal for Kansas fans. Last home game. They haven't won this rivalry game since 2008. Really would show how far they've come. You saw what it was like for that fan base, a few weeks ago. But this would be a huge one in terms of that rebuild.
Max, you mentioned it. You were in Lawrence with us. You were sitting in there as we had our first post-game meltdown podcast
the first
of the season.
2.
Yeah, the first of 2. I want to get your thoughts on Oklahoma.
It wasn't as bad of a meltdown, I would say, the first one. It wasn't, but I enjoyed them both.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you then, as someone that's listened to our meltdowns, but also I'm sure has watched Oklahoma this year, just what have been your thoughts on Oklahoma? And do you feel like, if they do go and win out, because I think there's a lot of expectation here that they are going to win these last 2 games. We'll see. But is that a successful season in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly way more glass half full here in terms of like, let's not forget where this group has come from. And they have already exceeded expectations and come a long way in year 2. And I think it's a testament to this coaching staff, which, look, a lot of people had a lot of questions about this coaching staff at this time last year, and just, do they have the right people in the building here to get this thing back on track? And I think that, it's a credit to Brent Venables and his coaches that I know that there's been some frustrating moments this season, but I think they've done a great job. They've got that roster right with all the flipping that they did in the offseason in terms of bringing in freshmen, bringing in a ton of players out of the portal. I think it's one of the most impressive turnarounds in the country. And even if people saw it coming, because Oklahoma recruits at a really high level, I still think it's been a great year. Now, as I sit here today, I probably think Texas and K-State probably are the 2 best teams in the conference in terms of like who's going to go to Arlington, but it's certainly there for the taking for Oklahoma to finish strong here. And, certainly if they were to find a way to Arlington, I think they would probably feel confident that they could compete in that game.
When you look at the all the tiebreakers that are now official, or what was the clarified, as the Big 12 put it yesterday.
Clarified.
What do you make of the weekend that is ahead, with everything that's on the line in Ames and everything that is on the line for Oklahoma, as well as all these other teams that are in contention to get to Arlington? There are 2 weeks left in the season. Just kind of, I would imagine, forecasting this thing, it's hard for me to think that Oklahoma State's going to lose twice coming in, and that would kind of leave Texas in a little bit of limbo with everything that is going into Saturday night at Jack Trice.
Yeah, for Texas to have Iowa State and Texas Tech, look, those are 2 teams that have obviously not been very consistent from start to finish the season, but I think we're seeing Iowa State, a young team, like they have grown up a lot. Now, I think the pressure is way more on Iowa State this week as just a young group that is going to have to play perfect just to have a chance to win this game. But could you see Texas losing one of these 2 games? Yeah, I can't say that's impossible. And if Texas were to lose one game, then, as you guys know, things get really crazy with these standings. And I think it would be fascinating to see. I personally don't want to do all the math on that, but we may have to, George.
Yeah, I know. I've already started looking into it. Max, I also wanted to ask you too, Texas is the only shot for the Big 12 to get a team into the playoff. I've already started wheels churning. Do you think they could get in, or is there a possibility that them or maybe a one-loss Pac-12 team gets left out of the playoff?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've not, even though we do these weekly playoff rankings, we've not really reached that point yet of like who is the team that's going to be the toughest to get left out. If there's a one-loss conference champ, whoever loses the SEC title game, kind of some of those deals. Like if Georgia were to lose that game, I think it's going to be the Oregon-Washington piece. I think is the very curious one, because they've both been so impressive. It's hard to leave. You can't leave Washington out, obviously, if they went out. I think Oregon's the better team. I think Oregon will be the team that wins the Pac-12, but obviously that's going to complicate this race too. And then you've got Florida State. Can Florida State run the table? If they can't, how much do you love the schedule and the resume that they've put together? I think Texas is still at this point, because this team hasn't been in this position in a really long time. This group of players certainly hasn't. I think Texas just winning by any margin and just continuing this run is the bottom. That's all they should be shooting for here. There's no style points. There's no how impressive were they. Like it's just survive and advance. I think for this Texas team, and honestly, I'd say the same thing for like Washington and Florida State. These are teams that they don't do this every year like Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State do, and so you just got to find a way to hold on. But who will have the best resume? Like that's going to be a very interesting debate if a bunch of these teams went out, and there could be kind of that really scary scenario for the committee where maybe there's 6 really good teams that deserve a spot.
The team that could really throw a wrench into everything is Oregon State with the opportunity that they have over the next 2 weeks with a win over Washington. That would set up what is basically a civil war for the Pac-12 bid. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how all of the inner workings of the college football world end up, as well as a Heisman Trophy race that has been rather, I think, kind of under the radar this year just because there hasn't been that guy that everybody can point to. What's kind of your overall thought on the Heisman Trophy race with 2 weeks left in the season?
Yeah, it says a lot that about where this season, how kind of unpredictable the season's been. That the quarterback of a 3-loss team, I think, is very, very clearly the front runner right now, Jaden Daniels from LSU, who is just putting together an absolute monster season statistically, and has played big in big moments, and just has put that team on his back entirely. And, certainly we haven't really seen a situation like this probably since Johnny Manziel of like, well, he looks like the best player. I don't care if his team's not going to win the SEC this year. But I think that there's still time. I think Bo Nix is very much in this. I think Michael Penix certainly has been the front runner at various times in this race. JJ McCarthy's an interesting one. I know he's high up there in terms of the odds, but I don't know that there's a lot of people who watch Michigan and sort of feel like he's the best player on that team or the reason that they're where they are right now. But certainly for him and for Marvin Harrison Jr., like the opportunity next week to have an all-time great performance in one of the biggest games in that rivalry, I think certainly that is going to be pretty compelling for voters too. So it definitely feels very wide open. I don't think Daniels has this sewed up. Some people probably wouldn't even view him as the front runner just based on LSU not being a playoff contender. So it's I feel like these next few weeks, it's definitely there for the taking, and maybe for an alternative guy like Daniels or even Marvin Harrison Jr., who doesn't have the best stats of all the receivers in the country, but is clearly one of the best players, period. It could be pretty interesting vote this year.
It's crazy to think Dylan Gabriel was just in that race a couple of weeks ago. I mean, if they go up and beat OSU or Kansas, he's probably still in that race. But sure. Max, got to ask you about the coaching carousel. That's getting fired up right now. What in your opinion is maybe the best job available right now or might come available? Because I feel like we don't know what's going to happen at Arkansas. I still think there's some question if Jim Harbaugh is going to come back to Michigan. We just saw the report that he's going to take the 3-game suspension. You never know. Maybe another job comes open. But what's been your thoughts on the coaching carousel so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Texas A&M is the best job out there that's open. I think that if you're a head coaching candidate, you're looking at that job. The bottom line of the Jimbo Fisher era, they gave him everything. It's not just the contract. The investment that they made into football, into facilities, that staff, if you go look at their media guide, they got 15 analysts on their staff. Like they'll give you everything that you could possibly ask for at A&M. And Jimbo Fisher just could not figure out how to take the next step at that place and really turn them into a contender. But I think that is, I think it's very appealing, and I think it's an interesting decision for Ross Bjork there. Certainly seems like early on, Mike Elko, Jeff Traylor, possibly Lance Leipold. There's some real program builders that are on that list there that would make sense for them. Curious to see, do they really swing for the fences with somebody that's kind of a sexy name, or do they kind of do the smart thing here and just find a guy that can make A&M very dangerous just by being a great program builder? I think that's the interesting one. The UCLA situation is definitely very curious. There was a report out this week that Chip Kelly is running out of time there. How good is that job in terms of going into the Big Ten is an interesting question mark. I don't know where they're at in terms of NIL, in terms of like how do in-state, recruits their view going to play in the Big Ten and stuff like that. But certainly there's big upside at UCLA. And look, I'm glad you mentioned it. Michigan, I've talked to plenty of people who just kind of assume that Jim Harbaugh is going to outrun the cops here and run off to the NFL after this season. And it would make sense to me. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I certainly would imagine that NFL owners don't really care about what's gone on in Ann Arbor this year. Jim Harbaugh's coached in the Super Bowl. That's good enough for them. So if Jim Harbaugh were to take an NFL job and just escape all the headaches that he's had with the NCAA, certainly that's an incredibly appealing job. And I'm sure he would have viewed that as wanting to hand that off to Sharon Moore or somebody on his staff. But who knows? Maybe if that job were to open up and it's a new head coach, that certainly sets off a pretty big time domino effect for this cycle that makes things crazy.
Somebody that might be on the chopping block as well, Sam Pittman at Arkansas. And we might have known a little bit more about the Arkansas program when BYU went out there and beat them at the beginning of the season. Real quick, before we get you out of here, Max, BYU, what have you thought about their adjustment to the Big 12 and everything to come here over the next few years within the Big 12 Conference? I think that Kalani Sitake, obviously he's gotten that program in a little bit of a rough spot right now. I don't know how much of that has been his fault with the injuries and everything that is mounting on the Cougar program this year. But just at a quick glance, what have you thought about BYU as they adjust to the Big 12?
Yeah, for these four new schools, you knew it was kind of be a tough year. Certainly for Houston and Cincinnati, you kind of figured that they're going to take their lumps this year. UCF, I think they lost like their first 4 or 5 conference games. You saw them obviously whoop Oklahoma State, but just not very consistent. And I think same with BYU. They've just against kind of these mid-tier teams like West Virginia and Iowa State, they've just kind of really been outclassed. And so they're trying like hell to get their 6th win. And I think they'll be highly motivated on Saturday to try and pull one of these off. But I certainly like Oklahoma to win and to cover. I think this BYU team, I think this program probably came in a little bit better equipped than the other 3 just because they've played Power 5 schedules a little bit more as an independent. But, I think that it's going to be tough to get that 6th win. Not impossible, but that's kind of where I think these programs are at right now as they kind of make that adjustment into, playing tougher competition every week.
Max, before we let you go, give us your Big 12 champion prediction and also who they play in the title game. Putting you on the spot. Who's going to win the tiebreakers here?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked out how this works, but I think it's Texas over K-State would be my Big 12 pick right now. I think those are the 2 teams that, we'll see if Texas is kind of limping to the finish line here a little bit. If they can just kind of put it together here and win these last 2 just by any margin, I think, like I said, that would be quite an achievement for that program. I think K-State is looking sweet right now. K-State is, I think it's a shame that we didn't get an Oklahoma K-State game this year. Those games were always really good and a good measuring stick for both programs. But I've just been really impressed ever since, they had that bizarre loss on Friday night against Oklahoma State. They had that moment against Texas Tech where it kind of seemed like, are they switching quarterbacks? Avery Johnson, what's going on here? But they've been rolling ever since. They gave Texas a hell of a fight in that game in overtime in Austin that they chose to go for it. I like them as probably the second best team in the Big 12 right now. But look, as we all know, there's lots of teams that can make a case for being being in that top 2. And wouldn't be surprised if it gets nuts and it comes down to technicalities.
Just 2 weeks left in the college football regular season. He is Max Olson, senior writer with The Athletic. Make sure you subscribe, check out all the stuff that they have on college football. Really good website on theathletic.com. Max, we appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe, I think Oklahoma fans would hope that we'll see here in a couple weeks, maybe at the Big 12 championship, but we'll see.
It's always weird to me when I don't see you guys at the Big 12 title game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just tradition. You probably booked that in at the beginning of the year, right? So yeah, I certainly do hope that I see you guys again soon.
George will be down at Harry Hines, maybe even if Oklahoma's not playing in the Big 12 championship, but we'll see. Thank you, Max. We appreciate it.
Hey, anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Max.
See ya. Special thank you to Max for joining us. Really good stuff, and he does a great job. I know that like on Mondays, it's always like, all right, when's the stop rate coming out? When's the stop rate coming out? It's good. He's a great guy. Always good to see Max, and we'll see. We'll see if Oklahoma is going to be playing in Arlington. That's probably the next time that we would run into the great Max Olson. But, we talked about it on the Instant Reaction Show on Tuesday, just in terms of everything that went into the Big 12 clarification or whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, kind of lay it out there for everybody in terms of not only does, and we're going to go about this at the idea of Oklahoma needs to win out. There's no question about it. I think everybody that is watching this knows kind of Oklahoma's status, tied for third in the Big 12. What needs to happen, and I know this is like a wide-ranging subject, but easiest path for Oklahoma to get to Arlington if they were to win their next 2 games against BYU and TCU?
There's 3 different ways that Oklahoma can get there from my understanding. Number one, OSU losing either of their last 2 games. They play at Houston this week, then they have BYU at home. If they lose one of those games, Oklahoma's getting in. Second scenario, Texas loses to Iowa State this weekend. If that happens, Oklahoma's going to get in. The third one, let's say Texas beats Iowa State this weekend, then if they go and lose to Texas Tech at home on Friday, which they play that evening game on that Friday after Thanksgiving. If they lose to Tech, they also need Iowa State to beat Kansas State. Otherwise, Kansas State is going to get in. So it's those 3 scenarios. So Texas losing to Iowa State, they get in. OSU losing one of their last 2. And then if Texas loses to Tech and then Iowa State beats Kansas State, both those things have to happen. So those are their 3 paths to getting into the Big 12 title game.
It's frankly probably a little bit easier to understand than all of the commotion and drama that was that filled the early portion of this week. But the picture is pretty clear, and I think for Oklahoma fans, it's kind of fun, if you will, in a way that they can watch the game at 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. if you're out there, and then you can basically just sit down and hate watch the rest of the day with Oklahoma State and Houston at 3 o'clock, and then Texas and Iowa State on Saturday evening. Somebody that will be there in attendance of McCade Matower. He was ejected from Oklahoma's game in the fourth quarter last week against West Virginia. Something that I didn't know about the suspension or lack thereof. McCade Matower will play this weekend. He mentioned on Monday night, though, that that was something that he had kind of been going back and forth about and was a little bit anxious about getting a decision from the Big 12. I don't really know the rule there. If you have to sit out. Obviously, if he was ejected for targeting or something like that, as Kendall Dolby was in the Kansas game, Reggie Pearson. Why did I think that?
I don't know. That's why I'm here, though, to correct
Thank you for correcting me. No, as Reggie Pearson, luckily they didn't have to not have him, or he had to serve this suspension against Oklahoma State. But as we said, McCade Matower is good for this weekend.
Correct. And again, I don't know the exact rule on that. I think maybe there's obviously targeting. You would miss half of a game.
Sure.
I think certain ejections maybe, like if he would have thrown like a punch.
Right, and actually been suspended by the Big 12 Conference or Oklahoma.
Correct. I think that's kind of what he was wondering is he going to get a further suspension for this? I mean, let's be honest, he probably should have never been ejected in the first place, but it is what it is. But he'll be playing Saturday, which is great because, when he's been in there, he's played well, and he's also the leader of that group, it seems. So you want him there, and they've had some trouble at guard this season, so it feels like they're finally getting some cohesiveness up front, and having Matier out there is a big boost for them.
McCade's kind of turned into one of the fun talks that we have on Monday nights, and here he is talking about the ejection process as well as finding out that he would be available come Saturday.
I'll say I was a little stressed out until I got to that point. All the stress was like lifted off my shoulders once that happened. So, but yeah, other than that, I do need to have better control of myself. I mean, that stuff like that doesn't happen to me. I'm a mature, football player. So, but yes, when that happened, obviously I did feel like I was a little bit more in the clear. But that's not gonna happen again. So.
But the love. Go ahead.
Have you ever been ejected from a game?
No, I have not.
Kind of badass.
Yeah.
I'll set it.
Yeah, I'm surprised after 50 starts that hadn't happened, but it happened. Put it on the resume, but we're gonna forget about it and move on. So I had a little bit of anxiousness just thinking about the next game, and I don't want to hurt our team, obviously, especially the possibility that maybe I was out for the first half of this game or whatever, which I'm not. But that was a little bit in my head, but. Just sitting there by myself, it was a lot of scenarios. I didn't want to, disrespect Coach Venables like that and do that to the Oklahoma brand, which is what I did. And I mean, I'm part of this team, and so what I do it reflects Coach Venables in the team. So I was a little embarrassed because of that. So
how quickly did you find out that you weren't going to have to miss time?
Just a second ago.
Oh, really?
Over there, yeah. Yeah. So I've been calling and asking. Mike just told me so.
walking off the practice field to find out that he wouldn't be suspended or he would be available for this weekend's game. And I know that we hit on it a little bit on Tuesday's show, but I consider that an apology that wasn't really an apology. You got to say it for some people out there because they probably feel better about themselves. I don't know. But he didn't need to apologize for anything. And, if nothing else, and he goes on to talk about it on Monday, it's probably kind of a good thing that you saw the fight that some of those guys had and holding, basically Drake Stoops back there as, he kind of got up for the cheap shot that was.
And I think the whole week last week kind of spoke to this team's mental toughness in the sense that coming off 2 losses, a lot of criticism, a lot of scrutiny around not only this team, but the program. You had the Drake quote last week that we've talked about ad nauseum. And then they go out and they play fantastic, right? They dominate. I think, McCade stepping in and at that point, what was it, 52-20? Maybe was it just now 59-20 at that point? I mean, it's one of those
52-20 because the final touchdown would have been Dylan Gabriel's fourth quarter run.
That's right. But, they're blowing them out.
Yeah.
And, to come to Drake's defense like that, Dylan Gabriel's defense, because he also got pushed down after the play, I think just speaks to this team and the pride that they have, right? I mean, they could have easily packed it in, said the season's over. But I think for them to have that kind of mentality, and also you can tell this group's close. And I think last year, I wasn't here, Eddie, but from outside looking in, it didn't always seem like last year's group had that same togetherness at times.
I just don't think that there were a whole lot of guys, and I'm not saying that they weren't all on the same page. I think it was just so new for everybody and going through those experiences.
Exactly.
Like, I think that is one thing that you can say about this group is it does seem like the chemistry is extremely good.
Yeah, no, and I think, again, that moment, as much as McCade wants to say it shouldn't have happened, I think it kind of speaks to that and the leadership on this team. I think that was something last year, too, that was a big talking point is where are the leaders? And I think this year there's no question.
Just remember back to last week in our conversation with Gabe Eichert going into the game, talking about how, moments like that, as bad as they are, as bad as it sucks to lose 2 games in a row, it kind of galvanizes a program. It brings everybody tighter together, or you disband and you do go out and maybe you get into a game where it's a fourth quarter battle, or you certainly don't end the season the way that, I think a lot of Oklahoma fans expect it to go. So it was, obviously good. It's good that McCade Matauer's back. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at right tackle, and that is somebody that we talked to as well. Jacob Sexton coming back from the ACL injury. He gets the start in front, not in front of, but in place of Tyler Guyton with the concussion going into last week. We did talk to Jacob on Monday, just in terms of getting out there. He's named a captain this week alongside true freshman Caden Green, fellow offensive line mate, and then just coming back from the ACL injury.
That's huge. I've dreamed about stuff like this, and seeing that come up, I was fired up, man. I'm so excited. It was better. Sitting on that sideline, man, it's amazing watching it and thinking about, in the next couple of years getting to come here and actually play. But man, I don't think there's anything like that. There's nothing that I can compare that to. Yeah, really just finish and footwork, but I would say the biggest thing was finishing. All our guys, I felt like, really played aggressively, and we're just getting after it. And I think that's really what kind of pushed us over the edge and got us good. The toughest thing for me was closing in on the end of last season. I thought I was going to have a lot of time to grow, but as soon as you tear an ACL, it's really just trying to get back to where I was. So I think I was really happy with how I handled it mentally. I think that was one of the biggest things that a lot of people kind of don't look at. So I always try to keep a positive outlook on it, and I was always trying to get that leg right, get it stronger. So.
I'm such a big fan of Jacob Sexton. I remember going and doing his pre-commitment interview that we run after they announce their commitment, and I just remember talking to him, and he just seems like such a big teddy bear. But at the same time, when you turn on the tape, as he did at Deer Creek High School and as he's starting to do here with more opportunities on Oklahoma's offensive line, you look at him and Caden Green, and I think that is a very bright future on the offensive line. Troy Everett's got a little taste. We talked about that this morning on the radio, just in terms of like what that center position could look like. It's kind of exciting. I think that him and Caden Green, though, specifically, those are 2 really good anchors for an offensive line that could return in 2024, as well as going into this weekend where McCade Matauer kind of hinted at it on Monday night that he could end up being the right tackle this weekend, kind of with Tyler Guyton's situation, a little bit of a question mark. coming off of the concussion? Do you want to come back? You know,
Right.
he's going to have a decision to make. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting.
What's so damn funny, George?
Nothing. You were just
I was
going.
rambling.
You were going there. No, I mean, I think the future is really bright. You hit on it. Jacob Sexton and Caden Green, I think they're both future stars. These are guys that are NFL caliber players. They're just getting their feet under them. So this is really valuable experience because you look at it next year, I don't know who their tackles are going to be. I feel like Caden Green's going to end up sticking at guard, where he, typically was maybe going to be a left tackle, and Jacob Sexton was going to be the right tackle. Now it sounds like Sexton might be the left tackle, and you have, Sexton and Green next to each other. You have Everett at that side. They're going to have some places to fill, obviously, but I think that you have to feel really good. They're both super nasty guys. You mentioned kind of like teddy bears. Both of them are like that when you talk to them in the media. Then you turn on the tape, and especially in the run game, they've both been really effective. And so, look, we'll see what happens with Kyler Guyton the rest of this season. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. I'm convinced he's already being mocked there. I think he's going to test really well. I don't anticipate him coming back next year, and we'll see what happens with him the rest of this year. He's dealing with a concussion. That's usually about a week or two process. Brent said on his coach's show he feels like Tyler Guyton's going to be back, but if you're going to have somebody come in and fill in those shoes, I think you feel really good about a guy like Jacob Sexton, especially the game that he's coming off of. He was performing really well.
It'll be interesting to see. And depending on what Oklahoma's Big 12 championship status is going to be, going into next week's Black Friday game, maybe Tyler Guyton just decides to hang it up and try his opportunity at, declaring his intentions to go pro, miss a bowl game. I really don't know. That's just speculation. If he doesn't play this weekend, would you want to come back? Is it worth playing 4 quarters for one game? So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens. Oklahoma, BYU coming up on Saturday. There was a lot of talk, and not a lot. There was a minimal talk about BYU. And who else better than to kind of kick off this player notebook than Dylan Gabriel, who grew up watching BYU play against Hawaii.
I think they're really good. Obviously played BYU before, so just know what they're about, and they're very physical and have played well together. Had a tough stretch, but shoot, that place is special and different, kind of unique in college football. So they're talented.
The offense you're getting ready to face, they've had some struggles this year.
Talented bunch. They've had a couple injuries, but they're coming back healthy this week, and I know that they're an excited team, and they've been playing really good football at their home turf. So we're just excited for the challenge, knowing that we're going to get their best. And they have a really good O-tackle. A lot of eyes on him right now, so it'd be a good challenge for the DNs going up against him. They're good enough to beat us, So coming with our best every week.
They have really good receivers, bigger guys, so we're going to have to get hands-on and be physical with those guys. And they have a really good quarterback. He's played ball at USC, Pitt, and some other bigger schools. So, they're going to come out with an attack mindset, so we just got to come in locked in.
What you're supposed to do, doing your 111th, as you say, you got 11 people on the field, you just got to do your 111th every guy. And so, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, everybody just doing their job. It is a mentality, because football is not easy, especially as you go later into the season. Everybody's beat up, nobody's at 100%, and so it comes down to that mindset: is how much do you really want this? Do you want to win, or do you want to just how you want to be remembered? Your legacy. It's all it comes down to that mindset.
I don't even know what it was called back in the day, but I don't even know what the conference is called. But BYU would play Hawaii, and I don't know if that was a non-conference game, I don't know. And then I just watched a bunch of UH football, and BYU is on their schedule, so just a familiar logo for sure.
It's funny. I did grow up Mormon. It's just like a lot of Polynesian people are Mormon. I've never thought of going to BYU growing up. I kind of slowly stopped, going to that church and everything. But nothing against BYU. It's a great program, great school. It was just not for me.
Not for you.
Now, you grew up Mormon, right?
I grew up Catholic. I was
me
actually
too.
a Alt City altar server.
Me too.
And probably one of the greatest Catholic free throw shooters in Oklahoma City Archdiocese history.
Me too.
Interesting. A lot of parallels there.
We should have a free throw shooting contest.
We should have a candle lighting contest, and I'd beat your ass in both.
When's the last time you went to church, went to mass?
I'm going to go to confession tomorrow before we get on a plane to go to Utah.
I guess I'll go with you.
Yeah, I usually hit the the Catholic Mass right before the flight at Will Rogers.
Yeah.
Remember when you wouldn't go with me before the Cincinnati flight. So interesting indeed. Oklahoma headed up to BYU, as we said, kind of as we in closing, as we're wrapping this thing up. BYU's not a very good football team. I expect Oklahoma to go up there and continue to kind of do what they did a week ago. I would expect them to be aggressive early offensively, and you try to build up a 21, 4-touchdown lead and just get out of there healthy, and then you kind of see where things lie at the end of Saturday, and you go into Black Friday and try to close out the regular season in a positive way before you head to a bowl game.
I also expect Oklahoma to take care of business. I do think it'll be close to start. OU hasn't been great on the road this year when you think about it.
No, they haven't.
Obviously, you look back at the game, against Kansas, they lose. Oklahoma State, obviously. Even going back to Cincinnati, they weren't great in that road environment. Tulsa doesn't count. OU Texas, neutral site. So they haven't been great on the road, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. So I wouldn't be shocked if it's closer than we think at halftime, but I think Oklahoma – at the end of the day, is just a much better football team. And like I said earlier, I think the mental toughness of this group is there, and they want to finish this season strong. That was a big question a week ago. This week, I think it's very clear. And they also know, we talked about it, they know there's a scenario where they can be playing for a Big 12 championship, which would be a massive goal to achieve for them. And they know if they just take care of business, weird things happen in college football. And again, we've said it on here too. Even if they don't make the Big 12 title game, there's a really good chance that they're playing in a pretty big bowl game at the end of the year that I think would mean a lot to a lot of these guys.
It will be, as much as we say, like, weird things happen in college football, we got 2 weeks left in the regular season, and really the weirdness has not hit. Maybe this is the weekend as, from a bigger landscape look at, kind of the college football slate coming up on Saturday. Washington, Oregon State's going to be really interesting for a number of reasons. There's a couple battles in the SEC. I don't know about Tennessee, Georgia, but it'll be a lot of fun. And then obviously all eyes will be on Ames. One more time before we get out of here. Cheer for Iowa State this weekend, correct?
Cheer for Iowa State. That's honestly because I just don't think Oklahoma State is, and maybe I'll be wrong.
Houston,
they just lost.
And Houston. Cheer for Houston if you want.
Yeah, they just got their butts kicked down in Orlando, so you never know. But I really think OU's easiest path is Iowa State beating Texas, and the Longhorns kind of falling out of that title game. I mean, there's a scenario in which OU doesn't play OSU or Texas in the Big 12 title game. They play Kansas State, who is also playing really good football right now.
As Max said, maybe nobody else playing better in the Big 12 right now outside of Kansas State, as they've kind of gotten that thing figured out here over the last 4 weeks. Average score or average winning margin 32. So bright and early come Saturday morning, 10 a.m. earliest kickoff at, I believe, Oklahoma football history, tying the 2000 what would it have been 2002 Cotton Bowl against Arkansas.
That's correct.
A 10 a.m. start. I slept in a.
You won that game too, right? 10-3.
I slept in an Astro van the night before. I was
at that game. I was 6. I was at that game.
Interesting. I was
old,
underage drinking and vandalizing neighborhoods at a very high level at that time in my life.
And scene.
And that's why we need to go to confession, right?
Yeah.
For George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We will see you back here on Saturday evening on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel for the instant reaction following OU BYU, as well as the Eskridge Lexus postgame show with Kerry Murdoch. So until Saturday, we will be reporting to you live from Utah. See you then.